Hello, I'm Sumanta Kashyapi, and in this talk, I'll be discussing about our new JCDL paper, query-specific subtopic clustering. You can scan the QR code on the left to access the actual paper. So in this talk, it will be relevant for anyone who uses topic models. Now, topic model is a great tool to discover broad topics in a collection of documents. However, they do not perform well in identifying fine-grained subtopics under a broad overarching topic, which is the main focus of this work. We aim to identify subtopic clusters within a collection of documents relevant for a broad topic or query and refer the task as query-specific subtopic clustering. Now, Wikipedia is a great aspirational example for this task. This is because each Wikipedia page can be viewed as an instance of our query-specific subtopic clustering problem. In that case, the title can be assumed as a query and all passages inside the page can be assumed as relevant documents. We also assume each section of the page as different subtopics, which are number one, very fine-grained, and two, changes with the query. This puts any query-specific subtopic clustering models to the ultimate test. Now, let's see why such fine-grained clustering is needed. Now, let's imagine we have a large collection of documents or articles or books about plants in our repository, and users can submit various queries to this repository to retrieve relevant articles. For example, consider this query, history of gardening. Now, for such broad query, all the documents in the repository will be relevant in this case, but each one for different reasons. To answer such broad queries, relevant documents arranged in form of subtopic clusters are much more useful to the user because in that case, the user can identify different subtopics when it is presented to the user. However, we have to note that the particular subtopic clusters should also be relevant for the query. For example, in this case, the clusters are based on the history of gardening of the plants. So sunflower and tulip are sharing the same cluster because they are related to the Renaissance period in Europe. However, sesame should be in a different cluster because it is related to the African history. But this is not the case for a different query. In this case, usage of plants. Now, sesame and sunflower should share the same cluster because both of them are cultivated for vegetable oil, whereas tulip is used for cosmetics purpose. So we can see through this example that the query plays an important role in generating subtopic clusters, especially for broad queries. In this work, we focus on this particular scenario. Okay, so formally we are given a query and a set of relevant set of passages like P1 to P5 as shown on the left-hand side. And we, our goal is to cluster the set of passages P1 to P5 into subtopics that are suitable for the particular query. In this case, something like the right-hand side. So there are existing research works that can be applied to clustering search results. However, they fail to obtain useful query-specific subtopic clusters due to two major factors. Number one, the query is not explicitly involved in the clustering process. So in cases where the clustering model has to produce query-specific clusters out of the same set of documents, as we have seen in our previous example, the clustering model will fail to identify the relevant subtopic clusters. And number two, the term frequency-based clustering methods work well for identifying coarse-grained clusters. However, identifying query-specific subtopics requires more fine-grained topical understanding. than simply measuring term frequencies. Now, later in this talk, we show empirical evidences that existing approaches like topic models and TF-IDF-based clustering methods fail to obtain satisfactory results for our task. So now we present our approach to the problem. Our proposed approach is threefold. So first, we train a similarity metric that learns to predict a similarity score between a pair of passages in context of a query. It is trained in such a way that it emits a high similarity score if the two passages share the same subtopic in context of the query topic, and emits a low score if they do not share the same subtopic. Now, by including the query into the trained similarity metric, we model the query-specific subtopic similarity metric. The model is implemented using neural networks and referred to as query-specific Siamese similarity model, or QS3M in short. Please refer to our paper for more details about the architecture, implementation, and different variants of the model. Okay, so also we can see that the query is part of the input here that goes into the trainable similarity metric. So the metric can be trained to be applied for unseen queries with enough training examples, which you do here. Okay, so next with the trained metric, once we have the trained metric, we obtain the pairwise similarity scores between all document pairs that we want to cluster and obtain this similarity score matrix. And finally, we apply hierarchical agglomerative clustering with average linkage using the similarity score matrix and obtain the subtopic clusters. The resulting clusters rely on the trainable similarity metric. Hence, by training the metric correctly, we can obtain the correct clusters. Now, to train and evaluate this similarity metric, we need a subtopic clustering benchmark. As there are no such benchmark out there, we obtain our own from a Wikipedia-based retrieval benchmark known as TrekCar. TrekCar dataset contains a large number of Wikipedia articles with detailed annotations of each article's title, different sections, and text passages under each section. For example, we can see in the picture that the article with title Gardening has two top-level sections, History of Gardening and Social Aspects. Also, each section has multiple relevant passages from P1 to P5. Now, for this example, we consider P1 and P2 to be sharing the same cluster because they are part of the same subtopic History of Gardening. However, P3 and P5 should be part of different clusters because they discuss different subtopics. Like this, we construct clustering ground truth out of each article in the TrekCar dataset, which we refer to as flat benchmarks. However, another alternative approach is to take the detailed hierarchy of sections into account while constructing the clustering benchmarks. And that is referred to as hierarchical benchmark. Again, for more details on this, please refer to our paper. So these pairwise clustering ground truth, along with the query information, constructs our clustering benchmark. We utilize different parts of the article to represent the query topic as part of the benchmark generation process, which we will discuss next. So the most straightforward way to represent the query topic is to use the article title itself and refer to as the title query, or QS3MT in short. We also explore two alternatives. In each Wikipedia page, the first few passages provide a broad overview of the topic, which are known as lead passages. We can use this lead passage as a more descriptive representation of the query, We refer to these query representations as description query and the resulting model as QS3MD. Another way is to obtain the embedding vectors of all passages in the Wikipedia page and then use the mean embedding vector to represent the query. This approach is referred to as the average or mean passage query, and the resulting model is referred to as QS3MP. So now let's see how our proposed model QS3M performs in this task. So here we show the evaluation results of only one dataset, CAR A flat benchmark with 125 total queries. The paper, however, has results of the rest of the evaluations. We compare 6 models here in terms of the adjusted Grant Index, which measures the clustering accuracy, which we can see on the y-axis. The green and red arrow here denotes statistically significant results in terms of pair t-test with Bonferroni correction and with respect to our baseline sentence part. This is a strong recent neural baseline. Now, if we look at the plot, we see that the top 3 performing models are all variants of our QS3M model. This basically are 3 different query representations, QS3MT for title queries, QS3MD for description queries, and QS3MP for average passage queries. Now, on the other hand, the worst 2 models are our non-neural baselines, TF-IDF cosine and topic models. So basically, through our empirical evaluation, we demonstrate 3 major points. The first up is, and the most important, is clustering models with query-specific similarity metric performs the best. This is demonstrated by the top 3 results. All of them are our QS3M model. The next up is that the improvements achieved by our QS3M model are all statistically significant. And also finally, topic model is not suitable for this task, as you can see in this plot. However, evaluations on the other data sets also result in similar findings, which we elaborate on our paper. Okay, so now to gain more insight into the success of our QS3 model, we conduct a qualitative study. In this, we manually go through pairs of passages and the query topic to understand where our QS3 model did well compared to other non-query specific baselines. For example, we take this pair of passages from the evaluation dataset. Both the passages are relevant for the query gardening, and specifically they share the same subtopic history of gardening. However, while passage 1 talks about European history of gardening, passage 2 discusses history of Persian gardens. Now, from the perspective of different cultures and civilization, it may seem that the passages discuss about different topics and hence should be placed in separate clusters. So without knowing the exact context of the query, the notion of similarity becomes ambiguous in this case. Now, due to this, the sentence part baseline, which does not have access to the query, assigns low similarity score for the paper, for the pair of passages. However, when we know that the query is gardening, then we want to regard them as similar because they both talk about history of gardens. This is correctly modeled by our QS3M approach, which assigns the pair with high similarity score. This also aligns with the ground truth data. So to conclude, you have seen that incorporating query helps clustering models. Also, this is supported by our empirical evaluation that demonstrates up to 12% improvement can be achieved. And also our model generalizes to unseen queries and also to different domains. Also, generalizability of an approach to clustering algorithms other than hierarchical clustering can be one of the future directions of this work. So with this, I conclude my presentations. Thank you. And I'll be looking for some questions here. Thank you.